Nurse cares for Millionaire in coma for 9 years. But what she does when everyone leaves changes everything. Chloe Miller never imagined her life would become so deeply intertwined with that of a stranger. At 28 years old, she had become the only nurse who remained by James Sterling's side during the long 9 years he spent in a vegetative state, in a luxurious mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Beverly Hills, in Los Angeles. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon, when all the family members had already left and silence took over the manor, that Chloe did something that would change everything forever. She approached the hospital bed where James lay, gently held his wrinkled hands, and whispered words she had kept in her heart for months. "Mr. James, I know you can hear me," she said with a trembling voice, "and I need you to know that you're not alone in this fight." What began as a suspicion turned into a certainty she carried in secret. Small signs that no one else noticed, almost imperceptible movements of his fingers when she talked about certain subjects, a subtle contraction of his facial muscles when she mentioned the names of certain people. Chloe was convinced that James was conscious, only pretending to remain in a coma. The discovery had happened 3 months earlier, during one of her daily conversations with the patient. As she always did, she talked about her day, about world news, about her own financial struggles to care for her sick mother. It was when she mentioned that she might need to look for another job that she noticed a tear rolling down the man's face. It wasn't the first time she saw James cry during her care. The doctors explained that they were just involuntary reflexes, the result of external stimuli on the facial muscles. But that tear was different. It had appeared at the exact moment she spoke about leaving, as if he were begging her to stay. Since then, Chloe developed a secret communication system. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Specific finger movements to indicate pain, discomfort, or basic needs. What she discovered left her stunned. James had been conscious for at least 2 years, but pretended to remain in a coma because he feared for his own life. The Sterling family was a nest of snakes, disguised as grief and concern. Victoria, the 45-year-old only daughter, barely hid her impatience to receive her inheritance. During her bi-weekly visits, she spent more time on the phone arguing with real estate agents than by her father's side. Her plans to sell all the family properties were openly discussed in the mansion's hallways, as if James had already passed. Richard, the 32-year-old adopted son, had turned his gambling addiction into a debt machine that consumed any money he could get from the family accounts. He constantly pressured the doctors for updates on his adoptive father's condition, not out of love, but out of anxiety, to know when he could settle his debts with dangerous loan sharks. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. The worst of all was Raymond, James's nephew and current administrator of the family businesses. Chloe had noticed his suspicious visits to the mansion's office during the early morning hours, always carrying folders and flash drives. The 50-year-old man was systematically embezzling funds from the family company, transferring money to offshore accounts and forging documents. James knew everything, but pretending to be unconscious was his only protection. The nurse uncovered these secrets little by little through the conversations the family held in the living room next to the bedroom, thinking James couldn't hear them. It was cruel how they openly discussed speeding up his departure, about finding less ethical doctors who would confirm the impossibility of recovery. "If he doesn't wake up in the next 6 months, we'll transfer him to a private clinic," Victoria had said during a conversation with Richard. "We can't keep paying for that expensive nurse forever. It's money down the drain." "I agree," Richard replied, counting money at the table. "And I've heard there are clinics that are more flexible with their treatments, if you know what I mean." Chloe felt her blood run cold upon hearing those words. They were planning to transfer James to a place where he could be neglected until his condition naturally worsened. It was murder disguised as medical care. That night she decided to tell James exactly what she had overheard. His reaction confirmed all her suspicions. He wept silently for minutes, squeezed her fingers weakly, and for the first time opened his eyes just a crack to look directly at her. "I'm going to protect you," Chloe whispered, stroking the man's grey hair. "I won't let anyone hurt you, I promise." From that moment on, they became accomplices in a charade that could save his life. James kept pretending to be unconscious during family visits and medical checkups, but when they were alone, he communicated through the signals they had developed. Chloe discovered that James had only been in a real coma for 3 years after the stroke he suffered. Over the last 6 years, he had gradually regained consciousness, but he quickly realized that revealing his condition would mean danger. The family conversations he overheard made it clear that his life was worth less than the money they would inherit after his passing. The businessman had built an empire in the construction industry over 50 years of hard work. He started as a bricklayer in Ohio and moved to Los Angeles in the 70s, where he founded his first construction company with a loan he secured after months of insisting at the bank. His dedication and honesty in business transformed the small company into one of the largest in the state. James never married. At 30, he adopted Richard after the tragedy that claimed the boy's parents, who had been his most loyal employees. Victoria joined the family at 15 when he decided to adopt her from an orphanage after discovering the girl was the daughter of an old girlfriend he had lost in his youth. Both grew up spoiled, never having to work or understand the value of money. Raymond, the son of his younger brother, had become his right-hand man in business after graduating in business administration. For years, James blindly trusted his nephew, delegating him increasingly greater responsibilities. What he didn't know was that Raymond had developed an addiction to sports betting that led him to systematically steal from the family company. The only person who treated James with genuine affection and respect was Chloe. She had arrived at the mansion 9 years earlier, sent by a nursing agency specializing in home care. At the time, she was a 19-year-old young woman, newly graduated and desperate to find a job that paid enough to support her sick mother. All the other nurses had requested transfers over the years. Some couldn't handle the tense atmosphere of the house, while others were fired by the family for being considered too dedicated or too inquisitive. Chloe stayed because she developed a genuine emotional connection with James, always treating him as a human being worthy of love and respect. She would talk to him for hours, telling stories of her difficult childhood in rural Mississippi, singing old songs her grandmother had taught her, reading the daily newspapers aloud to keep him informed about the world. When he was still truly unconscious, she did basic physical therapy exercises to keep his muscles from atrophying completely. Even after discovering he was conscious, Chloe kept up all those routines to avoid raising suspicion. The difference was that now their conversations were true dialogues, with James responding through the communication system they had developed. He would listen to her talk about her dreams of going to medical school, about her struggles to pay the bills, about the loneliness she felt from having no close family in Los Angeles. In turn, James shared memories of his youth, regrets about mistakes he had made raising his children, worries about the future of his company and his employees. Through blinks and subtle movements, he told her how betrayed he felt by the family he had raised, and how her presence was the only thing keeping him wanting to go on living. The connection between them transcended the professional relationship. It was a deep friendship built on mutual respect, understanding, and genuine affection. James had become the father figure Chloe never had, while she represented the loving daughter he wished he had raised. But this special relationship did not go unnoticed for long. Raymond began to notice small changes in Chloe's behavior. She seemed more anxious during her visits, stayed longer in the room after official working hours, and showed resistance when the family suggested changes to the care routine. One afternoon, he decided to question the nurse directly. "Chloe, I need to talk to you," Raymond said, intercepting her in the hallway. "I've noticed some irregularities in your work." "Irregularities?" She feigned surprise. "May I ask what they are?" "You've been spending too much time with my uncle. Beyond the established schedule, you constantly talk to him as if he could hear you. This is starting to draw the family's attention." "I've always talked to Mr. James," Chloe replied, keeping her voice steady. "The doctors say auditory stimulation can help with the recovery of coma patients." "My uncle is not going to recover." Raymond's response was cold and final. "The doctors made that clear years ago. You're creating unnecessary expectations and wasting energy that could be directed toward more practical care. With all due respect, Mr. Raymond, as long as I'm responsible for his care, I'll continue treating him with the dignity he deserves. Talking to him is part of my job." "That's exactly what I'm questioning." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're getting too emotionally involved with a patient. That's unprofessional." Chloe felt her heart race. Could Raymond suspect something? She needed to tread carefully so as not to compromise the secret she shared with James. "I am a professional, and part of my professionalism is treating my patients with humanity. If that bothers the family, I can look for another job." "Don't be dramatic," Raymond scoffed. "I'm just suggesting you maintain a healthy emotional distance. It's better for everyone." After the conversation, Chloe rushed to James's room. It was mid-afternoon, and all the family members had left, as usual. She closed the door and approached the bed. "Mr. James, Raymond is suspicious of something," she whispered. "I think we need to be even more careful." James slowly opened his eyes and looked at her with concern. Through blinks, he asked if she was thinking about leaving. Camilla's negative response reassured him momentarily. "I'm not going to abandon you," she said, holding his hand. "But you need to help me. Do you know of any way we can protect ourselves from Raymond?" The answer came through a complex sequence of movements she had learned to interpret. James was trying to say something about important documents, but the limited communication made it difficult to understand the details. He made movements indicating specific directions within the room. Chloe followed his gaze and noticed he was pointing at a painting on the opposite wall. It was an old painting of the farm where he had been born in Ohio. She approached and noticed the frame seemed slightly misaligned. Carefully, she moved the painting and discovered a small safe embedded in the wall. Her heart raced when she realized James was trying to reveal an important secret. She returned to the bed, and he began communicating a sequence of numbers through blinks. The combination worked. Inside the safe, Chloe found documents that left her speechless. There was a will dated 5 years earlier, predating James's stroke. The document was signed and notarized, leaving clear instructions on how his fortune should be distributed. As she read the will, Chloe felt her hands trembling. James had left only a small amount for Victoria and Richard, enough for them to live comfortably, but without access to control of his company. The majority of the fortune would go to a charitable fund for building public hospitals and nursing homes. The most shocking part was in the final clause. If James were to become incapacitated, the person responsible for his direct care during the period of illness would receive a substantial sum as recognition for their dedication. At the time the will was written, there was no specific nurse in mind, but now the document applied directly to Chloe. "Mr. James," she whispered, still processing the information, "did you do this for me?" He blinked once. "Yes." "But why?" "I was just doing my job." The answer came through a sequence of movements she interpreted as, "Because you treated me like a person when everyone else abandoned me." Tears began to stream down Chloe's face. She had never expected financial gratitude for her work, let alone an amount that would completely change her life. But at the same time, the discovery frightened her. If the family found out about the will, her life could be in danger. "What do we do now?" she asked. James indicated through gestures that she should keep the will safe, but not reveal its existence yet. First, they needed to gather evidence of the crimes Raymond was committing. Only then could they protect themselves when the time came to reveal that he was conscious. Over the following weeks, Chloe and James worked together like true detectives. She took advantage of the moments she was alone in the mansion to investigate Raymond's office, photograph suspicious documents, and jot down information about his strange activities. What they discovered was even worse than they had imagined. Raymond wasn't just embezzling money from the company. He had created a complex network of shell companies to launder money from other illegal sources. He was using James's construction company, Sterling Properties, as a front to clean funds of dubious origin, putting at risk the reputation the businessman had built over decades. Furthermore, he was secretly selling family properties through forged powers of attorney. Valuable land in Los Angeles and Ohio had been transferred to buyers who paid below market prices, with Raymond pocketing the difference. The most disturbing discovery came when Chloe found recorded conversations on a hidden device in the office. Raymond had recorded his own conversations with dishonest doctors, discussing how to accelerate the deterioration of James's condition without leaving a trace. "If we subtly increase the dosage of some medications," said the voice of an unknown doctor on the recording, "we can induce complications that will seem natural. Kidney failure, heart problems, nothing that would raise suspicion." "And how long would that take?" Raymond asked. 3, 4 months at most. We'll document everything as a natural progression of the disease." Chloe had to run out of the office to vomit. The family wasn't just waiting for James's natural passing. They were planning to murder him slowly through medical sabotage. That night she told James everything. His reaction was a contained rage she had never seen before. Through the communication system, he revealed that he already suspected the family's intentions, but hearing the confirmation was devastating. "We need to report this to the police," Chloe whispered. James blinked twice in refusal. Through gestures, he explained that they still didn't have enough evidence that would be accepted by a court. Besides, revealing that he was conscious now could make the family accelerate their plans before they could protect themselves. The strategy they developed was risky, but necessary. James would continue pretending to be unconscious, while Chloe gathered more evidence. When they had enough material, they would record a video of him explaining the whole situation, creating irrefutable proof of his mental capacity and his family's schemes. But time was running out. During a phone conversation Chloe overheard by chance, Victoria was pressuring Raymond to speed up the plans. "I can't take this situation anymore," Victoria said on the phone. 9 years is too long. I want my life back. I want to travel, buy things, live without this constant worry." "I understand, cousin," Raymond replied. "But we need to be careful. If anyone gets suspicious—" "No one will get suspicious if we do this right. That doctor you found, is he trustworthy?" "Completely. He's done this before. It's a matter of weeks." The new doctor would start seeing James the following Monday. Chloe and James only had the weekend to decide how to act. The situation had become a race against time, where his life depended on the next decisions they made together. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. On Saturday morning, while the family had gone out to take care of personal matters, Chloe helped James record the video that would be his protection. With great effort, he managed to sit up in bed for a few minutes, long enough to speak clearly about his condition and the schemes he had discovered. "My name is James Sterling," he said with a hoarse but firm voice. "I am recording this video on March 23, 2024, at my home in Beverly Hills. I want it on record that I am in full mental capacity, even though my family believes I have been in a vegetative state for 9 years. He went on to explain how he had gradually regained consciousness, how he had discovered his family's plans to murder him, and how Chloe had become his only ally and protection. "If something happens to me in the coming weeks," James said, looking directly at the camera, "I want everyone to know it won't be natural. My family is planning my elimination to gain access to the inheritance. I have evidence of all the crimes they are committing." The video was saved in multiple copies and hidden in different locations throughout the mansion. Chloe also sent a copy to her own email, making sure the evidence couldn't be easily destroyed. On Sunday, they received an unexpected visit. Dr. Arthur Vance, the new physician hired by the family, decided to do a preliminary assessment before officially starting on Monday. He was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, but with cold eyes that immediately made Chloe suspicious. "So this is the patient," said Dr. Arthur, examining James with apparent disinterest. 9 years in a coma. This is truly a prolonged case." "Yes, doctor," Chloe replied, maintaining her professionalism. "He's been stable, but without signs of significant improvement." "Stable," the doctor repeated, taking notes. "Let's see if we can make some adjustments to the treatment to optimize his condition." The word optimize was spoken with a tone that made Chloe's blood run cold. This man was there to carry out Raymond's plan, disguised as medical care. "Doctor, may I ask what your specialty is?" Chloe tried to sound casual. Internal medicine, with a focus on palliative care, he replied without looking up from his papers. I specialize in cases of patients in prolonged vegetative states. Palliative care, she repeated, pretending not to understand the implication. Yes, treatments to make a patient's final moments more comfortable. Often, artificially prolonging someone's life in an irreversible state can be considered cruelty. Dr. Arthur examined James superficially, testing reflexes he knew would yield no response. Throughout the entire examination, James kept up his act perfectly, remaining completely still and unresponsive to stimuli. I'll start a new medication protocol on Monday, the doctor announced. Some adjustments that may accelerate the natural process. After he left, Chloe locked herself in the room with James, and they both knew time was up. The doctor had made it clear that the plan was to kill him through drugs that would simulate natural complications. They had one night to decide what to do. Mr. James, I think it's time to reveal everything, Chloe whispered. We can't let that man come back here. James agreed, but through gestures indicated that first they needed to make sure Raymond couldn't destroy the evidence. He knew where his nephew kept the most incriminating documents and wanted Chloe to retrieve them before revealing that he was conscious. It was a risky plan. Chloe would have to break into Raymond's office in the middle of the night, photograph all the important documents, and then call the authorities. If she was caught in the process, she could be accused of theft and the entire operation would be compromised. But there was no choice. At 2 a.m, when the whole mansion was silent, Chloe left James's room and headed to the office downstairs. Her experience over the past few weeks exploring the place helped her navigate in the dark without making a sound. Raymond's office was a reflection of his personality, organized on the surface, but full of hidden secrets. Chloe knew exactly where to look, where to eye. In the bottom left drawer of the desk, protected by a simple lock she had learned to pick, were the most incriminating documents. Fake contracts, illegal property transfers, receipts for payments to corrupt doctors, communications with shell companies. It was enough material to put Raymond in prison for decades. Chloe photographed every page with her phone, making sure all the details were legible. It was while she was putting the documents back that she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart nearly stopped when she realized someone was coming down the stairs. Quickly, she closed the drawer and hid behind the window curtain, praying she wouldn't be discovered. Raymond came into the office and turned on the light. Apparently, he also had trouble sleeping and had decided to work through the early morning hours. Chloe held her breath as he sat down at the desk, just a few feet from where she was hiding. To her horror, Raymond turned on the computer and started making phone calls, even though it was 3 a.m. Dr. Arthur, it's Raymond. I know it's late, but we need to speed up the timeline. Yes, something changed. I can't explain over the phone, but I want you to start the treatment tomorrow, not Monday. I understand it's the weekend, but I'll pay double if you do it now. Chloe realized that something had alerted Raymond. Maybe he had noticed something out of place, or simply decided he couldn't wait any longer. Either way, time had definitively run out. Raymond stayed in the office for another hour, making calls and organizing papers. When he finally turned off the light and went upstairs to his room, Chloe waited another 30 minutes before coming out of hiding. Her legs were numb and she was trembling with nerves, but she had gotten the evidence she needed. Back in Mr. James's room, she told him what she had heard. The doctor would come on Sunday itself to begin the lethal treatment. They only had a few hours before it would be too late. Let's call the police now, Chloe whispered. James shook his head. Through gestures, he explained that it wasn't the right time yet. If the police arrived in the morning, Raymond could claim the evidence was planted, that Chloe was lying about his condition, that it was all an elaborate scheme by an ambitious nurse. The plan he proposed was more theatrical, but also more effective. When Dr. Arthur arrived to administer the lethal medications, James would reveal he was fully conscious in front of witnesses. It would be impossible to deny his mental capacity, and the evidence of Raymond's crimes would gain immediate credibility. It was risky because it meant letting the doctor enter the house with the intention of killing him. But James was confident that, by revealing himself at the right moment, he could turn the situation around before any harm was done. Dr. Arthur arrived on Sunday afternoon carrying a suspicious medical bag. Victoria and Richard were present, as was Raymond. Everyone seemed anxious, as if they knew this would be a decisive day. "Doctor, so glad you could come today," Victoria said with fake concern. "We noticed some changes in Dad's breathing during the night. We thought it best to move the appointment up." "You did the right thing," Dr. Arthur replied, opening his bag. "I'm going to administer some medications that should stabilize the situation." Chloe watched the medications he was preparing. They were drugs she recognized from her nursing studies, but in doses she knew were dangerous for someone in James's supposedly fragile condition. It was poison disguised as medicine. "Dr. Arthur," she interrupted, trying to buy time, "could you explain exactly which medications you're administering? For my medical records." "They're just stabilizers," he answered with irritation. "Nothing you need to worry about." "But I'm responsible for his care," Chloe insisted. "I need to know what's being administered." "Nurse," Raymond intervened with a threatening tone, "let the doctor do his job. You're not a physician to question procedures." It was at that moment that James decided to act. When Dr. Arthur approached with the syringe, he opened his eyes fully and grabbed the doctor's wrist with surprising strength. "I'm not going to let you kill me," James said in a clear, firm voice. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Arthur dropped the syringe, which shattered on the floor. Victoria and Richard stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Raymond went pale as if he had seen a ghost. "Daddy?" was all Victoria could whisper. "Yes, my dear," James said, sitting up in bed with difficulty but with determination. "I've been awake for a long time, and I heard every word you all said about killing me." That's impossible," Richard stammered. "You were in a coma." "I was faking," James replied, looking directly into the eyes of each family member, "because I found out you're planning to murder me so you can get your hands on my money." Dr. Arthur tried to slip out discreetly, but James shouted, "Nobody leaves this room, Chloe. Call the police now." Chloe, who had been equally shocked by the dramatic turn of events, picked up the phone and dialed the authorities. While she explained the situation to the dispatcher, James's family members went into complete panic. "Uncle, this is all a misunderstanding," Raymond tried to argue. "We only want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" James laughed bitterly. "You stole millions from my company, forged documents, sold my properties, and now you hired an assassin to kill me with drugs." "I can explain." Dr. Arthur tried to speak but was interrupted. "You can explain it to the police," James said. "Chloe recorded every conversation you've had over the past few weeks. We have evidence of everything." The truth was that Chloe hadn't recorded any conversations, but the photographic evidence of Raymond's documents was more than enough. The bluff worked perfectly, making the criminals incriminate themselves even further. "We didn't know you were conscious," Victoria sobbed. "If we had known, we would never have planned my murder," James finished. "What a wonderful daughter you've turned out to be, Victoria." The police arrived within 15 minutes, enough time for the family to unsuccessfully try to convince James that it had all been a huge misunderstanding. Dr. Arthur tried to escape through the garden, but the officers caught up with him before he could climb over the wall. The investigators found the lethal drugs in the medical bag, along with detailed instructions on how to simulate a natural decline. The photographic evidence Chloe had collected from Raymond's office was presented immediately, confirming decades of financial crimes. Raymond, Victoria, and Richard were arrested on the spot for attempted murder and conspiracy. Dr. Arthur was charged with attempted murder and practicing medicine without a license. Later investigations revealed he had lost his medical license years before in similar cases. But the biggest surprise was still to come. During the interrogations, the police discovered that Raymond was involved in a nationwide network of fraud, targeting the elderly. He used James's sterling properties as a front to legitimize scams carried out against dozens of families, stealing property from vulnerable people in several cities. The revelation turned the case into a federal investigation. James realized that his decision to pretend to be unconscious had not only saved his own life, but had also helped dismantle a criminal organization that had harmed hundreds of innocent families. While the family members dealt with the legal consequences of their actions, Chloe stayed by James's side during his real recovery. 9 years of pretending to be paralyzed had taken a real toll on his physical condition. His muscles were atrophied, his motor coordination needed rehabilitation, and he faced real challenges in returning to a normal life. But for the first time in years, James was truly happy. The woman who had cared for him with genuine love during his most vulnerable moments had now become his partner in building a better future. It wasn't a traditional romance. The age difference and the circumstances made that inappropriate. But it was a deep human connection based on mutual respect and affection. James revealed the will he had made years before, confirming that Chloe would benefit financially from her dedication. But now, she wasn't interested only in the dollars. She wanted to use the resources to study medicine and help other families going through similar situations. Together, they developed a project to create the Sterling Institute for Humanized Care, specializing in humanized care for coma patients. The goal was to train nurses and doctors on the importance of maintaining emotional connections with unconscious patients, since many of them might be more conscious than they appeared. The story of James and Chloe spread through the media, inspiring changes in the way hospitals and clinics treated patients in a vegetative state. Many families reported significant improvements in their loved ones' conditions after starting to treat them as conscious beings worthy of love. The trial of James's family members lasted months and revealed even more shocking details about their crimes. Victoria had used false documents to take out loans, using her father's properties as collateral. Richard had sold confidential information from Sterling Properties to competitors, harming innocent employees who lost their jobs due to the schemes. Raymond was sentenced to 25 years in prison for leading the criminal organization. Victoria and Richard received shorter but still significant sentences for their roles in the crimes. Dr. Arthur was sentenced to life in prison after being linked to several attempted murders of elderly patients in different states. Throughout the entire legal process, Chloe bravely testified about the months she spent gathering evidence and protecting James. Her determination and courage were essential to ensuring that the criminals were properly punished. She became a national example of professional integrity and human dedication. Over time, James recovered much of his mobility through intensive physical therapy. Although he would never return to the physical condition he had before the accident, he managed to walk with the help of a cane and resume some activities he enjoyed. More importantly, he regained his joy of living and his trust in human goodness. Chloe completed her medical studies with a scholarship funded by the Sterling Institute for Humanized Care, which they had created together. She specialized in neurology and intensive care, becoming one of the country's leading researchers on consciousness in seemingly vegetative patients. Her work saved lives and reunited families who had lost hope. The Sterling Institute for Humanized Care they founded trained healthcare professionals in communication techniques with unconscious patients. They developed protocols to identify subtle signs of consciousness that went unnoticed by traditional methods. Hundreds of patients who were considered vegetative were diagnosed as conscious and received appropriate treatments. James decided to donate most of his fortune to causes related to the care of the elderly and vulnerable patients. He kept only enough to live comfortably and to ensure that Chloe had the resources to continue her studies and research. For him, using the dollars to help others was the best way to make up for the years his family had used them only for selfish purposes. Sterling Properties was completely restructured, with new, honest and transparent administrators. James implemented benefit programs for employees and their families, ensuring that no one would go through the hardships Chloe had faced while caring for her sick mother. The company became a benchmark in social responsibility and business ethics. Chloe used part of the funds she received to bring her mother to Los Angeles, where she could receive proper medical treatment. It was moving to see the two most important women in her life finally meet. Her mother, Mrs. Martha, became a sort of adoptive grandmother to James, cooking typical Mississippi dishes he loved. The relationship between James and Chloe evolved into a unique family partnership. They weren't father and daughter biologically, nor husband and wife romantically, but they were chosen family based on love, respect, and shared experiences. It was a type of connection that transcended traditional definitions and showed that true bonds can be formed in the most unexpected circumstances. During the holiday celebrations, they received hundreds of letters from families who had been inspired by their story. People reported how they started talking more to relatives in comas, how they developed communication signals with seemingly unconscious patients, how they renewed hope in situations that seemed hopeless. A particularly touching letter came from an 80-year-old woman whose husband had been in a coma for 6 months. Inspired by Chloe's story, she began singing to him the same songs they sang when they were young. On the 3rd day, he opened his eyes and whispered her name. The doctors said there was no scientific explanation for the sudden recovery, but she knew it had been the power of love and constant presence. Stories like this multiplied across the country. The Sterling Institute for Humanized Care, founded by James and Chloe, documented hundreds of cases of recoveries that seemed inexplicable, but all had a common factor: family members who refused to give up and continued treating their loved ones as conscious and beloved people. Chloe's research on consciousness in vegetative states gained international recognition. She was invited to present her studies at medical conferences around the world, always emphasizing that science must be complemented by humanity. Her methods were adopted by hospitals in several countries, revolutionizing the treatment of coma patients. James, now 72, found in advocating for vulnerable patients' rights a new life mission. He used his experience as a victim of an attempted murder to push for stricter laws against financial crimes committed against the elderly. His testimony before Congress led to the approval of legislation that better protects people in vulnerable situations. The mansion where everything happened was transformed into the main headquarters of the Sterling Institute for Humanized Care. The rooms that once housed conspiracies and greed now welcome families who learn to care for their loved ones with love and dignity. The office where Raymond planned his crimes became a library specializing in literature on palliative care and neurology. The bedroom where James pretended to be unconscious for years was preserved exactly as it was, turned into a kind of museum that tells the real story of what happened there. Visitors are moved when they see the bed where a dedicated nurse saved a life through the power of compassion and the courage to do what was right. Chloe completed her medical residency as one of the brightest students in her class. Her thesis on nonverbal communication with patients in vegetative states became required reading in medical schools. She developed specific protocols to identify different levels of consciousness in patients who seem completely unconscious. The relationship between her and James continued evolving in unexpected ways. He became her mentor in the business field, teaching her about management and administration so she could efficiently run the Sterling Institute for Humanized Care they had created. She became his personal medical consultant, ensuring he stayed healthy while pursuing his philanthropic goals. During a fundraising event for the Sterling Institute for Humanized Care, James gave a speech that moved the entire audience. "I spent 9 years of my life pretending to be dead to protect myself from people who should have loved me. But it was during those years that I discovered what it really means to be alive. Being alive is having someone who cares about you when you can't give anything back. Being alive is having a purpose beyond yourself. Being alive is knowing that your existence makes a difference in other people's lives." He looked at Chloe, who was in the front row with tears in her eyes. "Chloe gave me life when I was pretending to live without her. Now together, we want to give hope to other families who are going through what we went through. This institute isn't just about medicine or dollars. It's about proving that genuine love can work miracles when combined with determination and courage." The audience rose in prolonged applause. Among those present were dozens of families who had been helped by the Institute's programs, doctors who changed their practices after attending the trainings, and former patients who regained consciousness after years in a coma. One of those success stories was particularly significant. David, a 45-year-old man who had been in a coma for 3 years after a motorcycle accident, had a wife who refused to give up on him. After attending the Institute's trainings, she learned to communicate with him through specific touches and whispers. 6 months later, David began responding to stimuli. Within a year, he was speaking again. At the event, he went up on stage to personally thank James and Chloe. "You didn't just save my life," David said with emotion in his voice. "You saved our marriage, you saved my family, you saved my hope. When I was trapped inside my own body, my wife's voice was the only thing that kept me fighting. And she learned to talk to me in a way that got through to me because you taught her that was possible." Stories like this became James and Chloe's daily motivation. Every life transformed, every family reunited, every patient who regained consciousness validated the decision they had made to dedicate their lives to this cause. The work wasn't easy. There were difficult days, hopeless cases, families who lost loved ones despite all efforts. But there were also small and great miracles that constantly reminded them why the work mattered. One of those miracles happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. A 16-year-old girl named Lily had been in a coma for 8 months after a car accident. Her desperate parents turned to the institute as a last resort before authorizing the removal of life support. Chloe worked personally with the family, teaching them specific communication and stimulation techniques. For 3 weeks, they strictly followed the protocols, talking to Lily about her favorite memories, playing her favorite songs, telling stories from when she was a child. In the 3rd week, during a session in which her mother sang a lullaby she used to sing when Lily was a baby, the girl gently squeezed her mother's fingers. It was an almost imperceptible movement, but the family had been trained to recognize subtle signs. Within 2 months, Lily was conscious again. Within 6 months, she had returned to school. Her recovery was studied by medical teams from several countries, but Chloe always emphasized that science alone didn't explain what had happened. The family's persistent love had been the decisive factor. Cases like Lily's led Chloe to develop a new line of research on the role of emotions in neurological recovery. She discovered that coma patients who received consistent, positive emotional stimulation had significantly higher recovery rates than those who received only technical medical care. Her findings were published in international medical journals and changed hospital protocols around the world. The concept of emotional medicine she developed became a mandatory part of nursing curricula at several universities. James, in parallel, used his business expertise to expand the institute's reach. He established partnerships with public hospitals to implement the protocols developed by Chloe in intensive care units. The results were so positive that the federal government decided to adopt the methods nationwide. The institute also began offering psychological support for family members of coma patients. Often, relatives needed help coping with guilt, exhaustion, and the emotional stress of caring for someone unconscious. Support groups led by specialized psychologists helped these families maintain the hope and energy needed for long-term care. One of the most successful initiatives was the creation of a national network of trained volunteers to visit coma patients who had no family present. Many elderly people or those without close relatives ended up abandoned in hospitals without receiving the emotional stimulation necessary for a possible recovery. The volunteers underwent rigorous training on how to communicate with unconscious patients, how to recognize subtle signs of consciousness, and how to provide positive stimulation through conversations, readings, and music. The program saved dozens of lives and restored dignity to people who had been forgotten by society. Chloe frequently visited these volunteers to supervise the work and continue learning about different forms of human connection. It was during one of these visits that she met Mrs. Mercedes, a 78-year-old woman who volunteered to talk with abandoned patients. "Dr. Chloe," said Mrs. Mercedes, "I do this work because I know what it's like to feel invisible. When my husband died and my children moved far away, I felt like I was in an emotional coma. No one saw me, no one cared whether I stayed alive or not." "And how did that change?" asked Chloe. "It changed when I decided that if no one was going to see me, I was going to make sure I saw other people who were being ignored. Every patient I talk to reminds me that we all need to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, even when we can't respond." Mrs. Mercedes's philosophy perfectly summed up the Institute's mission, making vulnerable people feel seen and valued. It was a mission that transcended medical protocols and touched the essence of humanity. The Institute's success drew international attention and Chloe began receiving invitations to establish branches in other countries. The first international expansion happened in Canada, where a Toronto hospital implemented all the protocols developed in the United States. The results in Canada were even more impressive than in the United States, perhaps because the concept was a complete novelty in the country, or perhaps because the local medical team was particularly motivated, but coma patient recovery rates doubled in the program's first year. The international success definitively validated the work of Chloe and James. They had created something that worked regardless of culture, language, or healthcare system. The human need for connection and love was universal, and the methods they developed spoke to that fundamental need. With international recognition also came interest from large pharmaceutical corporations and medical equipment companies. Several tempting financial offers were made to buy the protocols and methods developed by the Institute, but James and Chloe turned them all down. "Our work is not a commodity," James explained during an interview with a medical journal. "It's a mission. Selling it would mean that only people with money could have access to the benefits. We want any family, anywhere in the world, to be able to use our methods to help their loved ones." This decision to keep the Institute as a non-profit organization created some financial difficulties, but it also attracted donations from people around the world who believed in the mission. Small contributions from hundreds of families who had benefited from the programs ensured that the work could continue. One particularly significant donation came from an unexpected source. The pharmaceutical company that had tried to buy the Institute's protocols decided instead to fund a 5-year research study on the methods developed by Chloe. It was a multi-million-dollar investment that would allow for rigorous scientific validation and expansion of the program. The research scientifically confirmed what Chloe and James already knew from experience. Coma patients who received consistent emotional stimulation had significantly different brain activity than those who received only technical care. The results were published in one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. With full scientific validation, hospitals and clinics began adopting the protocols developed by the Institute as standard practice. What had started as a personal discovery between a nurse and her patient had become a revolution in modern medicine. During an international neurology conference, Chloe presented a case study that perfectly summed up the journey she and James had taken. 10 years ago, she said to an audience of 1,000 doctors, "I was a young nurse who talked to a coma patient because I thought it was the right thing to do. Today, we know scientifically that that conversation likely saved his life and shaped the future of thousands of other people." She showed slides with striking statistics, recovery rates that had increased by 300% in hospitals that adopted the protocols, significant reductions in hospital stay duration for neurological patients, improvements in the quality of life for family members who learned to communicate with unconscious loved ones. "But the numbers don't tell the whole story," Chloe continued. "They don't show the tears of joy from a mother who heard her son speak after 2 years of silence. They don't show the relief of a husband who discovered that his wife could hear him say he loved her. They don't show the transformation that happens when we treat vulnerable people with the dignity and love they deserve." The presentation received a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Doctors from around the world came forward to thank her for changing the way they saw their patients. Many reported that they had started talking more to unconscious people and were seeing results they never imagined possible. After the conference, Chloe and James walked along the beach at Miami Beach, Florida, where the event had been held. It was a rare moment of tranquility to reflect on the journey they had taken together. "Did you ever imagine our story would end like this?" Chloe asked, looking at the sea. "Never," James replied with a smile. "When I was pretending to be unconscious, I just wanted to survive. I never imagined it would turn into a mission to help other people." "And I just wanted to do my job as best I could," said Chloe. "I didn't know that talking to you would change my entire life." They remained silent for a few minutes, watching the waves break on the sand. Both thought about the hundreds of lives they had touched, the families they had reunited, the medical discoveries they had made possible. "You know what I'm most proud of?" said James finally. "It's not the Institute or the awards or the recognition. It's knowing that we proved that an ordinary person doing simple things with love can change the world." "And that it's never too late to discover your true purpose in life," added Chloe. They returned to Los Angeles the next day, ready to continue the work that had become their passion and mission. There were new projects in development, new research being planned, new hospitals wanting to implement the protocols. One of the most ambitious projects was the creation of a university specializing in compassionate medicine. The institution would offer courses for doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals on how to integrate emotional and human aspects into technical medical treatment. The university would be built on the land next to the institute, using part of the inheritance James had received back after the recovery of the assets Raymond had stolen. It would be a free institution, funded by donations and maintained by the very foundation they had created. Chloe would be the university's dean, applying to medical education the same principles she had developed in the treatment of comatose patients. The curriculum would include required courses on empathetic communication, family psychology, and humanitarian ethics. James would assume the presidency of the board of directors, using his business experience to ensure the university would be financially sustainable and would always maintain its original mission. He wanted to make sure that future generations of doctors would learn from early on to see their patients as whole people, not just as clinical cases. News of the university's creation generated worldwide interest. Medical students from several countries expressed interest in participating in the exchange programs that would be offered. The first class had not yet been selected, but there were already more than 1,000 registered applicants. Among the applicants was Lily, the teenager who had come out of a coma years earlier with the help of the institute. Now 21 years old, she wanted to study medicine to help other people who went through the experience she had lived. Her application included a moving essay about how the coma experience had changed her perspective on life and death. "During the 8 months I was unconscious," wrote Lily, "I could hear my parents talking to me, but I couldn't respond. It was like being trapped inside a dream where you want to scream, but no sound comes out. Their voices were my only connection to the real world. I want to study medicine so I can be that voice for other people." Lily's application was accepted immediately, along with other students who had personal experiences with methods developed by the Institute. The first class would be made up of people who understood, from their own experience, the power of human connection in medicine. As the university's opening date approached, Chloe and James organized a special ceremony to mark the 10th anniversary of the day she discovered he was conscious. It was a date that had become symbolic for both of them, representing the moment their lives became definitively intertwined. The ceremony took place in the mansion bedroom, where it all had begun. Present were the first families who had benefited from the Institute's programs, doctors who had changed their practices after learning about their work, and authorities who had supported the expansion of the methods. "Exactly 10 years ago," said Chloe to the small audience gathered in the room. "I was here talking to someone I thought couldn't hear me. Today, thousands of families around the world know that their words of love reach the ears of those they love, even when they seem to get no response." James, now 75 years old but still vibrant and determined, added, 10 years ago I was pretending to be dead to protect myself from bad people. Today I dedicate my life to proving that love and kindness are the most powerful forces that exist. And all of this happened because a young nurse refused to treat me like an inert object. Emotion took over the room as they recreated the original moment. Chloe sat in the same chair where she used to spend hours talking to James, and he lay down on the bed where he had pretended to be unconscious for so long. "Mr. James," she said with a choked voice, repeating the words she had spoken 10 years earlier. "I know you can hear me, and I want you to know that you're not alone in this fight." This time James was able to respond immediately. "Chloe, thank you for not giving up on me when everyone else had. Thank you for teaching me that true goodness exists in the world. Thank you for turning our story into hope for thousands of other families." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The journey that had begun in secret, with suspicion and fear, had turned into a public celebration of love, courage, and determination. After the ceremony, when all the guests had left, Chloe and James were alone in the room, as they had been so many times during the hardest years. "Do you regret anything?" Chloe asked. "The time I lost pretending to be dead when I could have been truly living," James replied. "But if I hadn't gone through that, I never would have met you. We never would have created the Institute. We never would have helped so many people. Sometimes, the worst moments of our lives end up leading to the best ones." "I don't regret anything," Chloe said. "Not the sleepless nights I spent worrying about you, not the moments I thought I was going crazy talking to myself, not the struggles we faced to prove the truth. It was all worth it to get where we are." They looked out the window of the room, seeing the construction of the university that was being finished on the lot next door. In a few months, students from all over the world would be there learning that medicine is much more than techniques and procedures. It's about human connection, empathy, and love. The story of Chloe and James had become a legend in the international medical community, but for them it remained simply the story of two people who found each other at the exact moment they needed each other most. A nurse who refused to give up, and a man who pretended to be dead to find out who truly cared about him. The end. Now we want to know your opinion about this story of overcoming and true love. Do you think Chloe made the right decisions in protecting James? Tell us in the comments which part touched you the most, and don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.